Well, and being that it is Women's History Month and we're coming to the end, we want our conversation to center around women, our function, our role, our desire. And in this conversation will be women not in relation to men, but just women in relation to our Creator and our identity as a reflection of His divine image. I wanted to start off with a poem, and I'm here with Sister Hadara. And why we connected was because this sister is like she's a voice that we don't hear too much in our community. She walks in a degree of humility and rooted and grounded in her femininity in a way that really touched me. Things that I've seen her post and say really gave voice to things that I thought about and maybe just never said, especially about how we show up in the world, especially about not having to force our way into people's presence, not having to toot our own horn, but just walking in our own power, knowing who we are, walking in our beauty, embracing all those aspects of ourselves, our beauty, our power, our sexuality, our creativity, and all the above. So I'm so blessed to have Sister Hadassah here in conversation. And what I'm going to do is share this poem. And I'm going to ask you your thoughts on it. Do you agree, disagree? And we'll go from there. To be a woman is to live with an acute awareness of an unrequited yearning that only wanes when overtaken in some creative task. The woman whose soul has never been burdened with this restlessness is blessed indeed. Like the Buddhist, she could immerse herself in the process of dismantling this desire to be free from suffering and experience bliss. However, engaged in that endeavor, she finds herself deconstructing her very being. So essential is that need that she cannot see herself living without it, even if it means existing in a state of subtle discontent. I'll give you a minute to like take that in and then just share your thoughts on it.
I think the two portions that stood out the most for me, the idea of that acute awareness, it brings to mind some of the most primal memories that I think individually and collectively we have as young girls is that emergence of self-consciousness. Being told, albeit with good intentions, from a desire to protect from our elders, we are often, some would say, policed or scrutinized very young. We're made aware of ourselves and the power of our bodies and our beings from a very young age, which can make us very self conscious. And oftentimes, again, giving the benefit of the doubt that those who were around us made us aware in a way that they thought was protective. Sometimes it can be very damaging to our authentic expression. And even before we started recording, we spoke briefly about authenticity. I think authenticity in vulnerability is one of the hallmarks of femininity that ironically is stifled in us due to that acute awareness of self. And there's a thin line between an empowering awareness of self, which some may call confidence, self assurance, a knowing of yourself and an acceptance of yourself unconditionally in and out, versus that self awareness that begets in a way that makes your being become performative. And one of the things I speak to a lot to the women that I work with is conditional femininity. This is something that is being taught and marketed more and more these days. We pretend as a collective, as a society, that we've gone away from feminism, which we know has been very dysfunctional and actually was a complete psyop against our people in particular. We know the history of Gloria Steinem infiltrating literally the Black Panthers and feminism being the seed planted to divide the Black community. And so we pretend to move away from feminism into femininity, but now femininity itself has become a new wave of feminism, a new way to perform softness and femininity for manipulation, for power, for dominance, which is pseudo masculinity. So the irony of that, I think it comes again out of that seed of self-policing and self-scrutiny that comes from that self-consciousness. And ironically, we seek to be empowered without realizing that very self-consciousness speaks to the power we already have. Why are we told as little girls to be very conscious of our bodies? Oh, don't walk like that. Don't sit like that. Don't talk like that. And instead of it being told from a loving perspective of how beautiful our bodies are and how cherished they are to be, it's again coming from a fear-based mindset of the danger that your innate being and the way you created can bring to yourself. So just by you walking naturally, the natural tilt of our pelvis that is out of our control, it is literally an anatomical characteristic of our creation. We're not trying to be sensual. We naturally move in that way. And then we're told that because we move that way, eyes could be on us, eyes could look at us, we could be victims of predators. And this speaks to an innate power in our very makeup. The way we look is powerful. The very shape of our body is powerful. It's mesmerizing. But we have to understand that we can accept this and own this love from a place of cherishing our bodies. And that goes into the modesty conversation. You know, I always try to kind of use the analogy of if a man had bars of gold, he wouldn't walk into the middle of the street and show them off. Obviously, something of value you're going to keep safe, in a safe, so to speak. And thus is the conversation about modesty. Enacted, modesty shouldn't be implemented from a repressive and fear-based center of let me hide something of myself to protect myself from violence. It should be this is lovely, this is beautiful, this is powerful about myself. And I'm reserving it and cherishing it and keeping it safe because I know its power is best expressed in restraint. So I think understanding that very thin line between self consciousness and self assurance, self awareness, knowing your power and being able to reserve and preserve it versus a disempowered mindset based in fear of policing yourself, being hyper conscious of being policed by society, and seeking to protect yourself out of hypervigilance for fear of violence. So that's one thing that came out of the poem. Another idea is understanding that we as women, the power of a woman is in subtlety, it's in influence. So just as you alluded to in the introduction, we don't have to assert authority in a masculine way by being in the forefront. We don't have to shout to the world that, you know, we are genius, we are amazing, we are powerful. Our power is in influence, innate influence, without saying anything. Often our silence, our subtlety is the most influential. The power of a woman's smile. People are pleased to please women. That's power enough. We don't have to demand and command and manipulate power. We compel it just by our natural innate being. And that's the key, the being of femininity rather than the doing of masculinity. But we're sold this narrative of we're not doing enough, we're not intelligent enough, we're not visible enough, we're not beautiful enough. This goes into what I call the witchcraft of marketing, the witchcraft of society's marketing. They're always selling us something due to this belief that we don't have enough or we aren't enough. It's always this covetousness for something more than what we are, rather than being and finding power in that authenticity, coming back again to this authenticity. So I think that's an awareness that would bring us to a place of peace and joy and being able to revel in being a woman, in that being, rather than having a kind of melancholy, even in that acute awareness. There's a lot of melancholy, there's a lot of sadness, it seems, around the awareness of being a woman. And I think that we should have conversations to change that because we should celebrate our femininity and not feel that there's more we have to do. There's more we have to be. There's more equality that we have to see. We're already equally powerful as men in different ways. Certainly we're superior in certain ways, but I do want to get into some of the conversation about our dynamic of femininity in relation to our creator, which is one of the points that you brought up that I'm really excited to get to. But before we continue, I am curious as to what your response to the poem would be, what your interpretation would be.
And you know what? Yeah, your take on it actually I know what I was thinking when I wrote it, but right, there's always layers of meaning. And what you pulled out was that feeling that there's something more, that feeling that there's something more that we need.
Yeah.
And when that line that to be a woman is to live with this unrequited yearning and this need. I think that's something that's been there for me my whole life, just
Mhm.
wanting more, wanting to be more, wanting to do more, wanting to know more. And all that stuff is,
Yeah.
is very it's positive, right?
Yeah.
But it can show up as overachieving in a way, or just I
Mhm.
don't even believe in overachieving, but achieving to the detriment of yourself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
achieving seeking success to the detriment of your happiness, of to the detriment of your soul, of your peace. And that's a lot of what we do as women. And I don't just mean like achieving in the marketplace, like having the type of family you want, wanting your children to do well at school, wanting to please all the people around us. Those a lot of times are achievements in our eyes. We want that, but we do all that to the detriment of our own
Mhm.
peace. A lot of
Mhm.
times we
Mhm.
can't find that balance. And it brought me back to the original, the archetype, when the serpent, I think you're already there, but I think it needs to be said. The sin, of course, it wasn't just eating the fruit. The moment that she said, the moment the serpent, said, well, it's not that, you'll die. It's that God knows that you'll be like him the moment
Yeah.
that you eat it. And then she saw, and then it says, and then she saw that it was good to the eyes and pleasing to eat.
Mhm.
The idea that I need more,
Yeah.
again, that need,
Mhm.
that yearning.
Mhm.
And it's like, you're literally in paradise. You literally have everything you need. You're in beauty. You're in the presence of God. You're talking to animals. You have your a partner. You have such a deep connection with this partner. You don't even see each other's bodies because you're so in tune spiritually. All the things that we talk about as women, we want to be so deeply connected to our
Mhm.
partner. She had all that, but still she was able to be convinced that I need more.
Mhm.
There's something I need. And I think that, and I'm not for sure woman blaming, but I know some people might, take it there. That whole idea that we are evil, we brought sin into the world, etc. I'm saying that I think that her weakness there was the fact that she's representative of the creative life-giving force, right? Because when Hashem created mankind, male and female created he, that was a complete reflection of the divine image. And then later we're seeing that now he takes woman out of man. So this is the feminine, powerful aspect. And when he was introduced to her, he said, what will become one flesh? But she was already there. It's like they're already one flesh.
Yeah.
He needed a partner because he needed to experience that dynamic of God. God could experience man as a reflection of God's self. But now Adam needed to experience his feminine aspect, his creative
Mhm.
aspect as a reflection of his self.
Mhm.
And so now they're interacting, and the first thing he says is, we need to become one flesh. And
Mhm.
so in that space, there's a responsibility that's created. I need to cover him and he needs to cover me. Because we were once one. We were, you know what I mean? And now a third party comes into the picture. Where's my covering? Like I said, she gave it to the man who was with her. So
Mhm.
I like to pull that out. He was present during this conversation. I want to bring it back to like this need. That's the thing, that's what I feel like, that's the female condition in the world. Like I mean, for me anyway, but I think other people will relate to it. It's just like we have such a desire to build, to do, to have, and it can become unbalanced. And it
Mhm.
can show up in ugly ways. It can show up as us trying to dominate men. It could show up in us like just burning ourselves out, trying to do everything and be everything to everyone. But yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And I started to tap into that, and I'm so glad you picked it right on up, when I spoke about that desire, that covetousness, and the witchcraft even of marketing. It's the same story of the serpent
Mhm.
selling us the idea that we need more, we need to do more, or be more, or know more. Hence, eating literally the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. What didn't she know? What did she feel she was deprived access to from the Creator? Oh, is he hiding something? He's something, I shall become like him. So obviously, he's at a level that I'm not. So that sense, that seed sown of discontent with one's circumstance, with one's being, I need to be more. Somebody's keeping something from me. And I think that is the seed even of feminism, the idea that somebody's depriving us of something. It's always this idea that the men have the power, or the patriarchy has the power, the system has the power, and we don't. They're keeping something from us. And so, even when you said, like, you're in paradise already, that idea of perfection, on another level, even more so, you are paradise. You know, understanding the woman, I liken the woman herself, the essence of being a woman, womanhood and femininity to paradise. You know, the layers of, I mean, we could even go into understanding part of the levels of Torah, you know, the Shat, Drash, the Sod, the different levels in which we excavate and interpret Torah, the hermeneutics of it. So just as Torah herself, which it's clear, even King Solomon likens Torah to a woman, the wisdom of the mother. Interestingly enough, even in that verse, when he says, that's why it's so important to go back to the language. When he says, forsake not and the teaching of your mother. In English, it makes it seem like they're the same thing. But in Hebrew, it's actually forsake not the musar, the instruction of your father, and literally the Torah of your mother. So the Torah is equated with mother. So that already denotes a deeper level of wisdom, a more all-encompassing level of wisdom attributed to the mother. Whereas Musar is instruction. You know, we even understand Musar meditation, meditating on the attributes. We're talking about character rectification. But the deepest secrets of wisdom of Torah, that's credited to the mother. Forsake not the Torah of your mother. So we already see Torah is feminine wisdom, femininity, and even the levels of Torah, the acronym that the sages use of Pardes, paradise, is the deepest levels of Torah, understanding and immersing in all levels of Torah. It even says, our sages say that we should study Torah for her sake. That is the greatest reward. Not studying Torah to be some great intellectual, not studying Torah to know some mysterious and magical secrets of the universe, not even studying Torah to fame, to earn merit for some sense of nobility, but literally just studying Torah for her own sake, just for the joy of the exploration of her being, which is inexhaustible. And one thing I always like to say, you know, to and about the brothers, you know, there's always these conversations about, but one single woman in her depths of femininity is inexhaustible. You could spend lifetimes exploring one woman. The way that we shift, the way that, you know, we have so many layers and levels of mystery and being. You know, I joke about, you know, I'm a fertility awareness educator as well. So we talk about the cycle seasons, our follicular phase, our ovulatory phase, our luteal phase, our menstrual phase. These are 4 seasons within a single month in which our entire essence changes. We can be quite literally 4 different women at least in a single month. Science shows our hormonal feedback loop changes, our pheromones change, our eyes change, our tone of voice changes, our literal cognition and memory capacity changes, our ability even to articulate and be eloquent changes over the course of the month. So this even shows us the wisdom of ebb and flow, just like the moon. When the moon is full, it's visible, it's seen, you can see it. Then the moon is hidden, the moon is veiled, the moon is dark. There's a time to be seen and a time not to be seen. There's a time to speak and a time to be silent. There's a time to watch, to receive, and there's a time to give, you know. And so this teaches us the secrets of the shifts of woman. And all of these layers and mysteries that we contain, again, a man would exhaust multiple lifetimes trying to excavate the mysteries of just a single woman, let alone having multiple wives. But that's another conversation. So, you know, again, we understand that even in the garden, the woman was already not only in paradise, she was a paradise in and of herself. And that desire, I like that you speak about that desire, because one thing I love to kind of bring out and acknowledge is we're constantly in this microcosm, macrocosm reflection of the creator. So we're always emulating the creator. That was the purpose of creation, something that the great Vapia Ben Levi always articulates so eloquently. The purpose of creation is emulating the creator in all his ways. Even when we go Kabbalistically into the Sefirot, the attributes of the creator, we cultivate these attributes: chesed, mercy, kindness, gevura, strength, restraint, judgment. We cultivate these to be the wholeness, not only in our humanity, but our divinity, to recognize that we are the unity of our creator. And so I think in the beginning, the purpose of creation was for the creator to have a reflection of itself. And I purposely say itself because we anthropomorphize the creator in a masculine way due to the nature of the emanation of what he gives us as the source. We know that ultimately the creator is beyond masculine and feminine and has attributes of both. And then so many more that are beyond our comprehension. So that relationship is likened to that of masculine and feminine because something that Chief Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu so beautifully elucidated is that masculinity at a very primal, basic level, outside of our social associations, outside of our gender role attributions, masculinity is the desire to give. It is emanation. Femininity is receptivity, the desire to receive. That's it, basic. And we know that subsequently, even down to our physical characteristics, our anatomy, it reflects that, certainly. We we are all adults. We understand what emanation looks like in the physical concerning a man and what he gives and what pours forth or streams forth from him. That also reflects that masculine emanation. We as women, we know even our anatomy informs us that we are hidden. We are the internal vessel, the receptacle, the crucible, the chalice, even the Holy Grail, as it has been symbolized throughout the centuries. We receive. We are the cup that is poured into to then overflow. So this masculine feminine dynamic is reflected between us and the creator on a general human level. And now I'm including masculine and feminine, male and female human beings. We as humans are the feminine to the creator's masculine because we are the receivers of the emanation of everything that the source provides, which is provision, which is sustenance, which is even the knowledge, the wisdom that comes from the creator. Everything pours forth from the source, and we are the receivers. So this is why we anthropomorphize the creator as a he, only in terms of the fact that we acknowledge he is the giver, he is the protector, he is our covering in the way that a woman relates to a man. So coming back to Adam and Chauah, male and female, being these reflections of each other. Creation, as we know it, was created for the creator to see a reflection of itself, to love and desire. And so the whole entire story of the universe, the story of creation is what I always say, this great love story, just like Shir HaShirim. I think if any book of Torah could encompass the whole of Torah, it is Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. This beautiful love story that is this grand metaphor and allegory of our relationship with the creator. As the woman yearns, you spoke about that yearning, even in your poem, the yearning, the longing that seems unrequited, even as she's looking for her beloved. He's at the door, then he's not at the door. Then she's
Right.
searching for him throughout the streets. You know, this elusiveness that keeps that longing, that keeps the fires of that desire stoked. That is why, the creator withdraws himself. And even all throughout Torah, all throughout Tanakh, we see literally those words. And the creator and Hashem hid his face from Israel. We hear this over and over. He hid his face for a time. He seemed to have left us. We just came through Purim. We know the destruction of Purim, it is said, because he hid his face. That also is alluded to even in the very name of Esther, Hadassah, Esther, the hidden one. This is a grander allegory and metaphor for the idea that the creator hid his face and we had to seek him and seek our own righteousness in seeking him to then find that deliverance. So separation and reconciliation is the whole point of the universe. So we keep that spark alive with that spark of longing because otherwise we wouldn't long for the creator. We would worship ourselves, I think. And that goes into a broader discussion about humanity's propensity for idolatry, worshiping the creator over the creation over the creator.
To your point, the desire, right? The longing that we see in the Song of Solomon and that we even have in ourselves. It reminded me of Genesis 3:15, and Hashem is declaring the curse over Hawa. And the first thing he said, well, I don't want to say the first. One of the things he said was, your desire will be for your husband and he'll rule over you. And it's interesting. I've asked myself this so many times. If it was a curse that her desire would be for her husband, what was her desire before that declaration? And I, I've answered in my own mind is that her desire was for God, just as, Adam's desire was for God. But now, in the aftermath of her desiring to be God, now she's cursed with this burden of desire for a man, for Adam. And you're never disappointed when you pursue a desire for God. A relationship with God, you're never ghosted, doesn't turn his back on you. He's ever present. He's ever giving, ever loving, always when you come into his presence. But now your desire has shifted to another human being who's just as fickle as you are, who has the same insecurities that you have, the same weaknesses, the same life experiences. So it's interesting, and that's what we wrestle with, and I think getting back, closest thing we all could do, male and female, is to just get back to that desire for God first. You know what I mean? That's the closest to paradise that we can experience right now, is to pursue God, because we'll never leave wanting, we'll never be disappointed. But I think we're getting kind of to the heart of something. We're getting to the heart of that desire and that need that I talked about in the poem, because I don't even think I knew what it was. I just knew I was feeling it. And it's about, I don't write for myself. It's about, I know I'm not the only one experiencing that. And I hope that, this conversation will help us kind of get somewhere. And I want to get back to that self-image idea that you were talking about in the beginning, where like so much of our self-image is influenced by the people around us. Us being a receiver, we're a reflection of what was poured into us as children, the ideas, the things that are projected upon us, like you said. And too many of us grow up with this self-consciousness around our bodies. And not only the self-consciousness, but there's like it's implicit that we also know what our bodies are stirring up in other people's imaginations, that we know how we're causing people to act just by existing. And we don't. It needs to be addressed maybe at another time, particularly in our community, about how maybe we don't give our girls room to be human, to be little girls, to explore their talents, explore what they want to do, because we're so afraid that they will be sexualized, or we're just projecting our own garbage on them. You know what I mean? We need to address that. But it's always relative, right? Because there are cultures where a woman with a child can sit bare-breasted and it's not offensive at all. I'm reminded of when I went my time in Haiti, and it was just not a thing. You're nursing your baby. No one's looking at you. No one's thinking anything. You're washing up. You're washing up outside. It's life. A lot of that has to do with where we're at now and how over-sexualized our cultures are in general. I think there's an argument for us just giving room to our daughters to just be in their own skin and giving them that space to do that, even if it means creating more all-female spaces. You know what I'm saying? For that to happen, but it needs to be able to happen.
I definitely agree. I love that where you landed. More all female spaces. We need those rites of passage and the men as well, frankly. That I think that's the biggest thing that's missing. And I think exactly what you said speaks to why there's that cultural difference in, North America and the over sexualization of bodies in the West from that Eurocentric mindset versus, in the Caribbean, in Haiti, in Africa you have more respect and just general understanding given to the human body for its own sake. Like you said, this is just a woman. This is just a little girl. This is a woman bathing, in the river. This is a woman nursing her child. This is a little girl. And having traveled, I can say as well, having traveled to Ghana, having traveled to Mexico and Belize, you see the difference in culture. You see children are allowed to be children. You see women allowed to nurse their children freely, women to be and not being over sexualized. And I think what's very interesting, I think intentionality matters. And I think that also speaks again, it reaffirms that silent power of intention. And what I mean is this I'll use an example. There's a famous story about Marilyn Monroe. In one of her biographies, there was a young lady who was working with her in some capacity. I think she was the daughter, maybe, of one of her therapists or something. Anyway, and she had a certain type of behind the scenes relationship with Marilyn. And she said they were walking together and no one in the street recognized her, seemed to recognize her. There was no paparazzi, there was no hullabaloo, it was like she could walk around as a normal person. And she says to her, "Do you want me to see me become Marilyn?" basically. And in the snap of a finger, she turns this on somehow. And then all of a sudden, it's like a light focuses on her. And it's like, "Oh, Marilyn, oh." And everybody's running up to get autographs. And there's this switch in her intentionality to be her versus just being her normal self. So there's an intentionality in turning on that desire to be seen, I think, in women. And we know we are bodies, right? Like there's a level to which you can see a naked woman's body. You see it as very entrancing, very hypnotizing, even. But there's also another level to where when that woman doesn't want to be seen in that way. And you see a body for what it is. It also brings to mind Dorothy Dandridge. There was a movie about her life with Halle Berry back in the 90s. And one scene that always stuck out to me was after she died, she had died naked, on her bathroom floor. And the police are in there, they're taking pictures. And her manager says, "Can you please cover her up?" And it's like this body that has been so sexualized. She was a sex symbol of her age. She was the Black Marilyn Monroe, or really, truth be told, the predecessor and inspiration for Marilyn Monroe. And you have this body that's been so sexualized, so sensationalized, but in her humanity, in her death, she's a body, a woman's naked body laying on her bathroom floor. And he calls for her modesty to be protected. Please cover her up. And I thought there was something so humane about that. And there's also this understanding of a body as a sacred vessel. And when a woman is just being herself, being her body, that doesn't mean to sexualize her. I'm also bringing to mind in many African cultures, it's actually a curse to see your mother's naked body or an elder woman's naked body. Why is that? She's not being sexualized for sure. Just to see her body becomes a curse to oneself. There's a famous documentary, Pray the Devil Back to Hell, about the Liberian War and the sisters who fasted and prayed for the end of the war and the tyranny and the rapes and the child trafficking and all the gruesome horrors of that time. And they were at the Capitol, seeking an audience with the generals. And one of the women says, "Okay, you're not going to listen to us. I'm going to take my clothes off." And then that was it. They were like, "Oh no, we're not going to let you do that." Because there was such respect given to this mother's body not being sexualized. So there's power in the body, and there's also power in the intention to be seen in that way, just like Marilyn Monroe in that example. One minute she's just a woman walking down the street. And then when she desires to turn that on, then she sends that light out to be seen in that way. But it's also something that's very much in her control. I think, there's something to be said about the respect that should be given to girls' bodies, women's bodies, mothers' bodies, in a way that also reveres and even cultivates an awe for the power of that body as a vessel of creation. And I think that's literally what's so awesome and awe-inspiring about a woman's body. And so, on the one hand, we will always automatically attract a certain fascination just for our bodies and their potential to be vessels for creation. And that should be celebrated. That should be acknowledged as a beautiful thing. But we must also have spaces where that awe-inspiring potential of that body is still respected. And as you said, I think a great solution to that is coming back to those rites of passage. In African cultures and indigenous cultures, we see a separation of the sexes. And this is hard. Even for me, I'm a mother. I have a son, he's 10 years old. I know in many African cultures, when they hit puberty, they go away from the mother's home. We're missing that here in the West. We're missing that delineation of spaces. And I think this is why men on the continent, men in the Caribbean, have more respect for the women's bodies and even the girls' bodies, because they're not always surrounded by women and cohabiting with women and girls, especially during those crucial moments of puberty. I think that is very important. Understanding the separation during that critical time. These rites of passage for the young women emerging into puberty, for the young men emerging into puberty, and the intentionality of that separation. When the young boy, turns 13, he goes off with the men and he begins to be in the hunters' circles and learn and cultivate certain skills. And likewise, the young women, the spaces are separated during that time. Whereas in the West, it's a recipe for disaster. You literally have children emerging into their hormones raging, and you talking about sending them to school together and cohabitating. What did you think was going to happen? But with that proper separation and intentionality, that protection and preservation of those sacred spaces, where the men are very intentionally surrounding and training those young men in their character development, in their discipline, in their self-control, especially sexually and emotional self-control. That's a critical time to be in that container with men without the distractions of female bodies, and to come together again later once you have achieved a certain level of mastery. And likewise for women. Young girls, we have to achieve mastery in our comportment. We have to be taught our feminine secrets and arts and skills. And we have to be taught our feminine mastery of our emotions, even our powers of influence and subtlety. We have to be taught to master this in a container, again, without the distraction of the young boys and the men around. So I do think those separated spaces are absolutely what's missing in Western society and leads to this disaster. So those rites of passage are important. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I'm reminded of like the Kikuyu. It's a cultural practice. They once a boy is 13, they will not. They'll create, if they have room on their land, the boy will get a space of his own. The teenager will get a space of his own. You're not under mom and dad's roof now. You have room to become the young man that you're to become. Here's the thing about those sacred spaces in that time to oneself, bringing it back to the creation narrative. Adam had time alone with God. The fact that God brought the woman to him implies that there was some time spent alone with God herself. And that's what we need, to develop our individual identities. And to your point, you have a lot of young men growing up right now who only had a mother, who didn't have the male dynamic in their life. And it does lead to a certain imbalance, identity crisis, because they're not having that reflection of them. They're not having that space alone with a man to see, okay, this is who I'm becoming. This is who I look like. This is where I'm going. And again, for the female, we need those spaces. We need that affirmation. And it's a bit too, this might sound backward, but it's not, in 2025. But we are a bit too co-ed right now. And I mean, even as adult, we're always, and here's my experience with all female spaces. The
Mhm.
conversation always goes back to our relationships, or somehow we're in competition with each other because of how we think we look to men. I look better to men than this one, this one. I think we need to learn to sit with ourselves again, love ourselves. You know, as women, we need to be comfortable sitting with ourselves, talking, being like little girls again. You know what I mean? Where it wasn't we're not comparing, we're just existing. We're enjoying each other's presence and being the women that we are, because doggone it, it's hard. I love being a woman. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I believe in reincarnation. And so I've come to believe in my previous life that I was a man, and that
Mm,
I think I was a man. I think I was very authoritative. I think people
mhm.
listened to me. I think people heard me, and I took that for granted. My
Wow.
experience as a woman has been, it's difficult to be heard. It's difficult to be seen in the ways that I wish to be seen, and it's difficult to be understood. And I
Mm,
think I'm experiencing the flip side of something I took for granted in a previous life.
yes, that's
It
what it is.
makes sense. I know we're gonna do this again. Has it been an hour? It's been an hour.
Oh, already? Man, time
Already,
flies.
right?
That's so
Right?
beautiful. Well, one thing I want to say while time has flown, I love being in feminine spaces. This is why I love working with women. I love coaching women, counseling women. I love speaking with women. I always say there's so much power in just speaking. And, even using her voice. But even when we are in the grocery store, we could start off literally talking about the weather, that proverbial small talk. And when women just speak freely and flow, there is so much wisdom. And, we are automatic vessels of prophecy. And I say that may be controversial for some to hear, but we know in all cultures around the world, there's a process for men to, and I think it has to do with how they're wired physically and mentally. I think it has to do with the resistance of the ego. The ego is necessary in some aspects. I think that men are naturally very competitive, and there is this reluctance to enter that feminine position of receptivity in order to hear even from, maybe even especially from, the creator. There's an understanding that to even enter the prophetic estate, you have to enter a feminine position of receptivity. We already have that. We are already the receptive beings. And I think it's so profound that in Yoruba culture, in Ifa, for instance, the male priests, the Babalawos, literally have an initiation process where they receive a surrogate womb. That is what Odu Ifa is. The womb is the repository of knowledge. When you understand Odu Ifa, many people think of it as a divinatory system, which is part of the story, but it's literally, in some places, they call it like the Akashic records. But this idea of a repository of knowledge of everything, past, present, and future, everything that is, and all of the knowledge of the universe, which we would liken to Torah. I would dare to even say, as controversial as it may seem, that is just another understanding, another language, another cultural description of what we understand as Torah, the multifaceted, multidimensional wisdom of Torah. And so, just as the womb in their culture, they literally ritually receive a surrogate womb to be able to divine. What does that say about women? We already have this. And even in the Ifa community, there was some controversy, especially a few years ago. Again, that feminist mindset rears up. And it was literally women fighting, saying, why don't we have to go to the Vodou and receive a womb? And it's like, well, duh, you are
Right.
here for something but women are automatically prophetic because we exist in and as the prophetic estate. So, by virtue of us having a womb and being the natural vessels, the receptacles, we receive the divine emanation of the Creator. In many ways, the woman, and in particular the mother, is as a God to man. We become that image of God that a man aspires to. A lot of times we are the ones that influence and inspire the man to be his best self. And this is a great power that we must learn to appreciate and utilize effectively. Instead of seeking erroneously for some power outside, know the power we already have
Right.
that is so much greater, honestly, than even what we're seeking. So I'll land there. Again, this is definitely to be continued. I look forward to many more conversations.
You brought it back to the self-image. That is what it is where we started. I hope that anyone listening would take that away at least. Let's elevate our self-image, understanding that we are paradise, that we are a reflection of the divine, and with that comes a whole lot of responsibility. I definitely do want to have a conversation about prophecy. So maybe that'll be our next conversation next time. Thank you so much, Chauah Hadassah, for your time and your wise words. Shalom.
Absolutely praise. I look forward to the next conversation. Thank you so much. I'm humbled and honored by the privilege of your invitation. You are a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.